Phantom Doubleday Dell Audio Publishing presents Virtual Light by William Gibson. The courier presses his forehead against layers of glass, argon, high-impact plastic. He watches a gunship traverse the city's middle distance like a hunting wasp, death slung beneath its thorax in a smooth black pod. Closing his eyes, he centers himself in the background hiss of climate control. He imagines himself in Tokyo, this room in some new wing of the old Imperial. He opens his eyes. Mexico City is still there. The 8 empty bottles of plastic miniatures are carefully aligned with the edge of the coffee table. On the screen above the console, the Petichka await him, all in a creamy freeze. Their young men invariably entering from behind, wear black leather gloves. 28 peripheral images frame the Russians in their earnest coupling. He glimpses figures carried from the smoke-blackened car deck of an Asian ferry. He opens another of the little bottles. Now the Petichka, their heads bobbing like well-oiled machines, swallow their self-absorbed boyfriends. The camera angles recall the ardor of Soviet industrial cinema. He drinks the vodka. He watches television. He comes awake from a dream of metal voices down the vaulted concourses of some European airport, distant figures glimpsed in mute rituals of departure. Darkness. The hiss of climate control, the touch of cotton sheets, his telephone beneath the pillow, and yes, the glasses are here, tucked beside his telephone. He draws them out, opening the earpieces with a guilty pleasure that has somehow endured since Prague. Very nearly a decade he has loved her, though he doesn't think of it in those terms. But he has never bought another piece of software, and the black plastic frames have started to lose their sheen. The label on the cassette is unreadable now, suede white with his touch in the night. So many rooms like this one. She is waiting for him always in the white house up the canyon road. The candles, the wine, the jet-beaded dress against the matte perfection of her skin, such whiteness, the black beads drawn smooth and cool as the snake's belly of her tense thigh. Far away beneath cotton sheets, his hands move. Later, the telephone chimes softly and only once. Yes? Confirming your reservation to San Francisco, someone says, either a woman or a machine. He touches a key, recording the flight number, says goodnight, and closes his eyes. Her white arms enfold him. Her blondness eternal. He sleeps. Intensecure had their wagons detailed every 3 shifts. Intensecure used this big specialty car wash off Colby. 20 coats of hand-rubbed wet honey sienna, and you didn't let it get too shabby. That one November evening, the Republic of Desire put an end to his career in armed response. Barry Rydell had arrived there a little early. He was here in Los Angeles driving a 6-wheeled Hotspur Hussar. The Hussar was an armored Land Rover that could do 140 on a straightaway, assuming you could find one open and had the time to accelerate. Hernandez, his shift super, said you couldn't trust an Englishman to build anything much bigger than a hat, not if you wanted it to work when you needed it. "Sign here," said the crew boss. Rydell took the pad and the light pen and signed the signature plate. He walked over to Gunhead, deactivating the door alarm. Somebody had written that inside, Gunhead, in green marker on the panel above the windshield. The name stuck, but mostly because Sublet liked it. Sublet was Texan, a refugee from some weird trailer camp video sect. He said his mother had been getting ready to deed his ass to the church, whatever that meant. Sublet had bad allergies. He went into shock from various kinds of cleaners and solvents. The allergies made him light sensitive, too, so he had to wear these mirrored contacts. What with the black intense secure uniform and his dry blonde hair, the contacts made him look like some kind of clan-ass Nazi robot. Like Rydell, a lot of intense secure's response people were former police officers, and if the company's rules about not carrying personal weapons on duty were any indication, his co-workers were expected to turn up packing all manner of hardware. Hernandez gave it all back after the shift, but when they went calling, they were supposed to make do with their Glocks and the chunkers. The theory was, you didn't always encounter that many armed intruders, and a chunker was a lot less likely to injure the client or the client's property. If you did encounter an armed intruder, you had the Glock. Although seriously tooled-up intruders tended to be tightened on Dancer, and were thereby both inhumanly fast and clinically psychotic. There had been a lot of Dancer in Knoxville, and some of it had gotten Rydell suspended. He'd crawled into an apartment where a machinist named Kenneth Turvey was holding his girlfriend, 2 little kids, and demanding to speak to the president. "Damn it," Turvey had said when he saw Rydell. "I just want to speak to the president." He was sitting cross-legged, naked, on his girlfriend's couch. He had something like a piece of pipe across his lap, all wrapped with tape. "What is that thing you got there?" Rydell asked. "It's a gun, and it's why I got to talk to the president." "Never seen a gun like that. What's it shoot?" "Grapefruit cans, full of concrete." "No shit." "Watch," Turvey said, and brought the thing to his shoulder. Rydell watched as Turvey took aim, back through the open bedroom door at the closet. "Turvey," he heard himself say, "where's the goddamn kids?" Turvey punched a hole the size of a fruit juice can through the closet door. The kids were in there. They must have screamed, though Rydell couldn't remember hearing it. He couldn't remember shooting Kenneth Turvey in the head either, or anything else at all until he woke up in the hospital. There was a woman there from Cops in Trouble, which had been Rydell's father's favorite show, but she said she couldn't talk to him until she'd spoken with his agent. He squinted up at her. She was sort of good-looking. "What's your name?" "Karen Mendelsohn." "You from Cops in Trouble?" "Yes." "What do you do for him?" "I'm a lawyer," she said. Rydell couldn't recall ever actually having met one before, but after that he wound up meeting lots more. Gunhead's displays woke when Rydell inserted the key and ran a basic systems check. The downlink from the Death Star wouldn't work while he was still in the car wash, but it was Sublet's job to keep track of all that with an ear bead. There was a notice in the staff room at Intense Secure telling you it was company policy not to call it that, Death Star, but everybody did anyway. Officially, it was the Southern California Geosynclinical Law Enforcement Satellite. Sublet was waiting outside, his silver eyes reflecting the red of passing taillights. "Howdy," Sublet said, climbing into his seat. "How's old Gunhead?" Rydell scanned the displays, satisfied. "Not too shabby. Hope we don't have to respond to any damn stealth houses tonight," Sublet said, chewing. Stealth houses, so-called, were on Sublet's personal list of bad calls. He said the air in them was toxic. Rydell didn't think it made any sense. Stealth houses were bigger than most regular houses, cost more, and Rydell figured the owners would pay plenty to keep the air clean. "Forbidden Zone," Sublet said. "Herv Villachez, Susan Terrell, Marie Pascal Elfman." "When they make that?" 1980. I wasn't born yet. "Time on TV's all the same time, Rydell." Rydell felt sorry for him. The Texan really didn't know any other way to start a conversation, and his folks back home in the trailer camp would have seen all those films and more. Sublet wasn't too anxious to talk about it, but Rydell had gotten the idea that these people figured video was the Lord's preferred means of communicating, the screen itself a kind of perpetually burning bush. "Well," Rydell said, trying to pick up his end, "I was watching this one old movie last night." Sublet perked up. "Which one?" "Dunno," Rydell said. Sublet's blank silver eyes widened in disbelief. "Jesus, Barry, you shouldn't ought to watch TV, not unless you're going to pay attention." Rydell wasn't in the hospital very long after he shot Kenneth Turvey. His lawyer, Aaron Persley himself, made the case that they should have kept him in there longer, the better to assess the extent of his post-traumatic shock. But Rydell hated hospitals, and anyway, he didn't feel too bad. He just couldn't recall exactly what had happened. And he had Karen Mendelsohn to help him out with things, and his new agent, Wellington Ma, to deal with the other people from Cops in Trouble. Not one of them as nice as Karen, who had long brown hair. Rydell never actually did meet Wellington Ma, at least not till quite a while later. But Karen would bring him in a little briefcase with a pair of iPhones on a wire, and Rydell could talk with him in his office in L.A. Turvey's girlfriend was bringing an interlocking set of separate actions against Rydell, the city of Knoxville, and the company in Singapore that owned her apartment building. About $20 million in total. Rydell was glad to find that Cops in Trouble was right there for him. They'd hired Aaron Pursley, for starters, and of course Rydell knew who he was from the show. He was famous, and he defended cops like Rydell from people like Turvey's girlfriend and her lawyer. The lawyer maintained that Rydell shouldn't have been in her apartment at all, that he'd endangered her life and her children's by so doing, and that he'd killed Kenneth Turvey in the process. Mr. Turvey being described as a steady worker, a loving father figure for little Rambo and Kelly, a born-again Christian, and a recovering addict to 4-thiobusculin. Recovering, Rydell asked Karen Mendelsohn. She'd just shown him the facts from the lawyer. He wasn't recovering. Hadn't even recovered from the last punch he jammed up his nose. Apparently true, she said. But both Mr. Pursley and Mr. Ma feel it best we coast it but soon, Barry. You and me. To L.A., none other. Will I like it? At first, she said, at first it'll probably like you. And I know I do. Which is how he wound up going to bed with a lawyer. One who smelled like $1 million, talked dirty, slid all around, and wore underwear from Milan, which was in Italy. The Kill Fix, Surinder Burdett, Gudrun Weaver, Dean Mitchell, 1997, said Sublette. Never saw it, Rydell said. Mama saw Surinder Burdett, got her autograph too, kept it up on the set with the prayer hankies and her hologram of the Reverend Wayne Fallon. She had a prayer hanky for every damn thing. One for the rent, one to keep the AIDS off. Prayer hanky won't keep any AIDS off, Rydell said. Get yourself vaccinated like anybody else. Get your mama vaccinated too. Sublette shuddered. Reverend Fallon always said, screw Reverend Fallon, Rydell said, hitting the ignition. Son of a bitch just makes money selling prayer hankies to people like your mama. Sublette's head seemed to draw down between his high shoulders. Ain't that simple, he said. It's everything I've been brought up to be. Can't be all bullshit, can it? Rydell, glancing over at him, took pity. No, he said. I guess it wouldn't have to be, necessarily. What'd they bring you all up to be, Barry? Rydell had to think about it. Republican, he said finally. What he'd come to like best, cruising with Gunhead, was getting back up in the hills and canyons, particularly on a night with a good moon. Sometimes you saw things up there and couldn't be quite sure you'd seen them or not. One night, Rydell had slung Gunhead round a curve and frozen a naked woman in the headlights. Just a second she was there, long enough for Rydell to think that she might have been Japanese. Then she saw him. He saw her see him and smiled. Then she was gone. Sometimes when he was up there, he'd think about her. He knew he didn't know what she was, and in some funny way, he didn't even care if she'd been human or not. Now he just drove, on the night that would turn out to be his very last night on patrol with Intensecure. No moon, but a rare, clear sky with a few stars showing. 5 minutes to their first house check, then they'd be swinging back toward Beverly Hills. Gunhead said, multiple homicide, hostage-taking in progress, may involve subscribers' minor children. Benedict Canyon, you have Intensecure authorization to employ deadly force. And the dash lit up like an old-time video arcade. Karen Mendelsohn lived, umpteen floors up, in Century City 2, a.k.a. The Blob, which looked sort of like a semi-transparent green tit, and it was the third tallest structure in the L.A. basin. When the light was right, you could see almost clear through it, and make out the 3 giant struts that held it up. The tit had a carefully corroded copper nipple, like one of those Chinese hats. That was where Karen's apartment was, along with the tennis club, bars, and restaurants, and a mall you had to pay to join before you could shop there. She was right out on the edge, with curved windows set into the green wall. The network had gotten Rydell a room in a West Hollywood hotel. But he never did spend much time up there. Until the Pookie Bear thing broke in Ohio. He'd mostly been up at Karen's. The discovery of the first 35 Pookie Bear victims pretty much put paid to Rydell's career as a cop in trouble. It hadn't helped that the officers who'd first reached the scene were easily the two best-looking women on the whole Cincinnati force. Then the count began to rise, ultimately going right off any known serial killing scale. Then it was revealed that all the victims were children. Aaron Pursley was already leering it back to Cincinnati in a plane that had no metal in it whatsoever. Karen had locked the goggles across her eyes and was talking nonstop to at least 6 people at once, and Rydell was sitting on the edge of her big white bed starting to get the idea that something had changed. When she finally took her goggles off, she just sat there staring at a white painting on a white wall. She got up and walked out of the room. She came back 5 minutes later in a fresh black outfit. "Pack. I can't have you here now." Then she was gone, no kiss, no goodbye, and that was that. Sublette yelped as the crash harness tightened automatically, yanking him up out of his usual slouch. Rydell slung Gunhead up onto a verge, doing 70 past the museum-grade Bentley, and on the wrong side at that. Eye blink of a woman passenger's horrified face, then Sublette must have managed to slap the plastic plate that activated the siren. Straight stretch now, no cars at all. Rydell straddled the center line and floored it. "Death Star!" he yelled. It was Sublette's job to keep the beat in his ear at all times, listening for the satellite relayed word of the real cops. Sublette turned, snapping the magazine into his Glock, his face so pale that it seemed to reflect the colors of the dash display as readily as did the blank steel rounds of his eyes. "The help's all dead," he said, "and they got the 3 kids in the nursery." He sounded like he was talking about something mildly baffling he was seeing on television. "Say they're gonna kill him, Barry." "What do the fucking cops say about it?" Rydell shouted. Sublette touched a finger to his right ear. He looked like he was about to scream. "Down," he said. "They can't be fucking down. They're the police." Rydell looked down at his dash display. Gunhead's cursor was a green spear of destiny, whipping along a paler green canyon road toward a chaste white circle the size of a wedding ring. In the window immediately to the right, he could read the vital signs data on the subscribers' 3 kids. Their pulse rates were up. In the window below, there was an infrared frame of the subscriber's front gate. Right then, probably, was when he decided just to go for it. A week or so later, when it had all been sorted out, Hernandez was basically sympathetic about the whole thing. Not happy, mind you, because it had happened over his shift. But he did say he couldn't much blame Rydell under the circumstances. IntentSecure could replace that gate, sure, because they'd installed it in the first place. Then there was the damage to the house itself, mostly to the living room windows, which he'd driven through, and the furniture, which he'd driven over. But there had to be something for the Schönbrunns on top of that, Hernandez explained. Something for emotional pain, he said, pumping Rydell a cup of old, nasty coffee from the big stainless thermos behind his desk. It was 10 in the morning, and Rydell was wearing a pair of baggy, faded orange trunks, the black SWAT trainers from his IntentSecure uniform, and an inflated transparent cast on his left arm. Emotional pain, Rydell said. Hernandez, who was very nearly as wide as his desk, passed Rydell the coffee. "You way lucky, all I can say. I'm out of a job, arm in a cast, I'm way lucky." "Seriously, man," Hernandez said. "Mr. and Mrs. Schönbrunn, they've been very nice about this, considering Mrs. Schönbrunn's embarrassment, everything. You know, I've got hassled. Hey, I'm sorry." Hernandez shrugged enormously. "Anyway, you're not fired, man. We just can't let you drive now. You want us to put you on gated residential? No problem." "No, thanks." "Retail properties? You want to work evenings and see no fashion mall?" "No." Rydell went over to Cedars to see Sublette. The Texan was sitting up in bed, chewing gum and watching a little liquid crystal disc player propped on his chest. "I've been over at the shop seeing Hernandez, man," said Rydell. "He says you don't have to worry any about your job." Sublette looked at him with his blank silver eyes. "How about yours, Barry?" "I'm history over there. They won't let me drive anymore." "But what are you going to do, Barry?" You gotta make a living, man. Well, I don't know. What about those hackers, Barry? You figure they'll get the ones set us up? Nope. Too many of them. Republic of Desire's been around a while. Hernandez says the LAPD told him they figured somebody wanted Mrs. Schoenbroom caught more or less with her pants down. Nothing that Gunhead had logged that night had been real. Someone had gotten into the onboard computer and plugged a bunch of intricately crafted and utterly spurious data into the communications bundle, cutting Rydell and Sublet off from Intent Secure and the Death Star, which hadn't, of course, been down. With Gunhead's crumpled front end still trying to climb the shredded remains of a pair of big leather sofas, Rydell had come to the conclusion that that high, crazy thing, that rush of going for it, was maybe something that wasn't always quite entirely to be trusted. But man, Sublet had said as if to himself, they're gonna kill those little babies. And with that, he'd snapped his harness open and was out of there, Glock in hand, before Rydell could do anything at all. Responding, Rydell heard himself say. He kicked the door open and jumped out, his trainers going straight through the inch-thick glass top of a coffee table. He couldn't see Sublet. He stumbled forward, vaguely aware that there was something wrong with his arm. "Freeze, cocksucker," said the biggest voice in the world. "LAPD! Drop that shit or we blow your ass away." Rydell found himself the focus of an abrupt and painful radiance, a light so bright that it fell into his eyes like hot metal. "You hear me, cocksucker?" Wincing, fingers across his eyes, Rydell turned and saw the bulbous, armored nacelles of the descending gunship. He dropped the Glock and raised his arms, or tried to. The left one was broken. They found Sublet 15 feet from Gunhead. His face and hands were swelling like bright pink toy balloons, and he seemed to be suffocating. "What the fuck's wrong with him?" asked one of the cops. "He's got allergies," Rydell said through gritted teeth. They'd cuffed his hands behind his back, and it hurt like hell. "You gotta get him to emergency." Sublet opened his eyes, or tried to. "Barry?" Rydell remembered the name of the movie he'd seen on television. "Miracle Mile," Rydell said. Sublet squinted up at him. "Never seen it," Sublet said, and fainted. Mrs. Schoenbroom had been entertaining her Polish landscape gardener that evening. The cops found her in the nursery. Angered beyond speech, she was cinched, quite interestingly up, in a couple of $1,000s worth of English latex North Beach leather and a pair of vintage Smith & Wesson handcuffs that someone had paid to have lovingly buffed and redone in black chrome. The gardener evidently having headed for the hills when he heard Rydell parking Gunhead in the living room. Chevette never stole things, or anyway not from other people, and definitely not when she was pulling tags. Except this one bad Monday, when she took this total asshole's sunglasses, but that was because she just didn't like him. How it was, she was standing up there by this 9th floor window when he'd come up behind her. The tip of a finger found her bare back, under Skinner's jacket, under her t-shirt, touching her. Bloodshot eyes, a face that looked as though it were about to melt, grinning at her, like he knew she didn't belong here, not at a party like this and not at any old but seriously expensive hotel up over Geary. But it had been the last tag of the day, a package for a lawyer. Locking and arming her bike, in the hollow sound of the Morrissey's underground lot, she'd gone up to 8, to a corridor quiet as the floor of some forest in a dream. The lawyer signed the tab without making eye contact. She headed back down the hall, her new SWAT trainers sinking into freshly vacuumed pile the color of rain-wet terracotta. But when the elevator doors opened, this Japanese girl fell out, or near enough, Chevette grabbing her beneath both arms and propping her against the edge of the door. "What's a party?" "What folks gonna ask you?" Chevette said. "Floor 9, big party." So Chevette, with a real wine glass full of real French wine in one hand, and the smallest sandwich she'd ever seen in the other, came to find herself wondering how long she still had before the hotel's computer noticed she hadn't yet left the premises. Looking around, Chevette had seen that she wasn't the only underdressed local to have somehow scammed entry. There were a couple of pretty obvious working girls, too, but maybe that was no more than the accepted amount of local color for whatever this was supposed to be. But then this asshole was right in her face, grinning his mean-ass drunken grin, and she's got her hand on a folding knife, something else she's borrowed from Skinner. That blade's under 3 inches, broad as a soup spoon, wickedly serrated and ceramic. Skinner says it's a fractal knife. "You're not enjoying yourself," he says. European, but she's not sure which flavor. His jacket's leather, too, but nothing like Skinner's. "You're doing fine till you showed up," Chevette says, thinking it's probably time to go. This guy's bad news. "Tell me," he says, "what services you offer?" "The fuck's that supposed to mean?" "Clearly," he says, pointing at the girls across the room, "you offer something more interesting than these two." "Fuck that," Chevette says. "I'm a messenger." And a funny pause crosses his face, like something's gotten past his drunk, nudged him. Then he throws back his head, laughs like it's the biggest joke in the world. "I say something funny?" The asshole wipes his eyes. "But we have something in common, you and I. I am a messenger, a courier," he says, like he's reminding himself. "So praj on," she says, and steps around him. Just then the lights go out, the music starts, and it's the intro to Chrome Karan's She's God's Girlfriend. She finds herself opposite this girl in a leather skirt, little black boots with jingling silver spurs. "You from the city?" the girl asks. Chevette nods. "Cody can usually find what he wants in San Francisco." "Who?" The woman raises her eyebrows. "Our host." She smells expensive. Chevette's suddenly worried about how she must smell herself after a day on the bike and no shower. But the woman takes her elbow and leads her aside. "You don't know Cody?" "No." Chevette sees the drunk, the asshole, through the doorway into the next room, where the lights are still on. He's looking right at her. "Who's this Cody?" "Cody likes a party. Cody likes this party. This party's been going on for several years now. When it isn't here, it's in London, Prague, Macau. You find this strange?" The woman drinks her wine off and tosses the empty glass over her shoulder. Chevette hears it break. "Yeah, I guess. I mean, I just walked in." "Where do you live?" "The bridge," watching for the reaction. The grin widens. "Really? It looks so mysterious. I'd like to go there, but they say it's dangerous." "It's not," Chevette says, then hesitates. "Just don't dress up so much, right?" "You like living there?" "Shit, yes. I wouldn't live anywhere else." The woman smiles. "You're very lucky then, I think." "Well," Chevette says, feeling clumsy, "I gotta go. You have a nice party, okay?" "This is not a nice party." Settling the wide shoulders of Skinner's jacket, Chevette begins to work her way through the crowd. And then suddenly there's her drunk, her Euro, sweating brow too close to the vaguely worried face of one of the girls. He's got her backed into a corner, and everyone's jammed so tight that Chevette finds herself pressed up against his back for a second. Not that that interrupts whatever infinitely jury shit he's laying down for the girl. And Chevette, glancing down, sees something sticking out of a pocket. Then it's in her hand, down the front of her bike pants. She's out the door, and the asshole hasn't even noticed. In the sudden quiet of the corridor, she wants to run. She wants to laugh, too, but now she's starting to feel scared. Walk. Past the party's buildup of trays, dirty glasses, plates. Remembering the security grunts in the lobby. The thing stuck down her pants. Down a corridor that opens off this one, she sees the doors of a service elevator spread wide now and welcoming. The doors rumble shut and Chevette closes her eyes. She leans back against the big quilted pads hung on the walls and wishes she were up in Skinner's room listening to the cables creak. B6 is not the garage she so thoroughly wants now, but this maze of 100-year-old concrete tunnels with big old pipes slung in brackets along the ceiling. She finds a narrow stairway and climbs. The air is hot and dead. She feels the whole weight of this old building pressing down on her. But her bike is there, on B2, behind a column of nicked concrete. "Back off," it says when she's 5 feet away. Not loud like a car, but it sounds like it means it. Under its coat of spray-on imitation rust and its artful bandaging of silver duct tape, the geometry of the paper-cord carbon-wrapped frame makes Chevette's thighs tremble. She slips her left hand through the recognition loop behind the seat. There's a little double zick as the particle brakes let go, then she's up and on it. It's never felt better as she pumps up the oil-stained ramp and out of there. Rydell's roommate, Kevin Tarkovsky, wore a bone through his nose and worked in a windsurfing boutique called Just Blow Me. Monday morning, when Rydell told him he'd quit his job with Intense Secure, Kevin offered to try to find him something in sales in the beach culture line. Kevin, I don't know how to surf, windsurf, anything. Hardly been in the ocean in my life. Sales is about providing an experience, Barry. The customer needs information, you provide it. But you give him an experience, too. Kevin tapped his 2-inch spindle of smooth white beef bone by way of illustration. Then you sell him a new outfit. But I don't have a tan. Well, Kevin admitted, you would need a tan. He and Kevin were sharing one of 2 bedrooms in a 60s house in Mar Vista, which meant sea view, but there wasn't any. Someone had rigged up a couple of sheets of drywall down the middle of the room. On Rydell's side, the drywall was covered with those big self-adhesive daisies and a collection of souvenir bumper stickers from places like Magic Mountain, Nissan County, and Skywalker Park. Rydell had bought a futon with most of his first month's pay from Intense Secure. He'd bought it at this stall in the market. They were cheaper there, and the stall was called Futon Mouth, which Rydell thought was pretty funny. Lately, waiting to take the cast off, he'd spent a lot of time on that futon staring up at those bumper stickers. He wondered if whoever had put them there had actually bothered to go to all those places. You online to any of the job search nets, Barry? Rydell shook his head. This one's on me, Kevin said, passing Rydell the helmet. It wasn't anything like Karen's slick little goggles, just a white plastic rig like kids used for games. Put it on, I'll dial for you. Well, Rydell said, this is nice, Kevin, but you don't have to go to all this trouble. Kevin touched the bone in his nose. Well, there's the rent. There was that. Rydell put the helmet on. The courier's dreams are made of hot metal, shadows that scream and run, mountains the color of concrete. He comes upright, alone in the wide bed, trying to scream, and the words are in a language he no longer allows himself to speak. His head throbs. He forces himself from the bed, pads naked to the tall, old-fashioned windows, fumbles the heavy drapes aside. San Francisco. Dawn like tarnished silver. It is Tuesday, not Mexico. In the white bathroom, wincing in the sudden light, scrubbing cold water into his numb face. The dream recedes but leaves a residue. The horrors at the party. This Cody Harwood. Decadent. The courier disapproves of decadence. His work brings him into contact with real wealth, genuine power. He meets people of substance. Harwood is wealth without substance. He puts out the bathroom light and gingerly returns to his bed, favoring the ache in his head. With a duvet drawn up to his chin, he begins to sort through the previous evening. There are gaps, overindulgence. He disapproves of overindulgence. Harwood's party, the voice on the phone instructing him to attend. He'd already had several drinks. He sees a young girl's face, anger, contempt, her short dark hair twisted up in spikes. He remembers sitting at the broad mahogany desk drinking. Before the call, before the party. He remembers the two cases open in front of him, identical. He keeps her in one. The other is for that with which he has been entrusted. Expensive, but then he has no doubt that the information it contains is very valuable. He folds the thing's graphite earpieces and snaps the case shut. Then he touches the case that holds all her mystery. The White House on the hillside, the release she offers. He puts the cases in the pockets of his jacket. But now he tenses. Beneath the duvet, his stomach twisted with a surge of anxiety. He wore the jacket to that party, much of which he cannot remember. Ignoring the pounding of his head, he claws his way out of the bed and finds the jacket crumpled on the floor beside a chair. His heart is pounding. Here. That which he must deliver. Zip into the inner pocket. But the outer pockets are empty. She is gone. He roots through his other clothing. On his hands and knees, a pulsing agony behind his eyes. He peers under the chair. Gone. But she, at least, can be replaced, he reminds himself, still on his knees, the jacket in his hands. He will find a dealer in that sort of software. Thinking this, he is watching his hands unzip the inner pocket, drawing out the case that contains his charge, their property, that which must be delivered. He opens it. The scuffed black plastic frames. The label on the cassette worn and unreadable. The yellow translucence of the audio beads. He hears a thin, high sound emerge from the back of his throat. Careful to calculate the 30% tip, Yamazaki paid the fare and struggled out of the cab's rear seat. He shouldered his bag, turned, and walked towards the bridge. As ever, it stirred his heart to see it there, morning light aslant through all the intricacy of its secondary construction. Its steel bones were lost within an accretion of dreams. Tattoo parlors, dimly lit stalls stacked with decaying magazines, unlicensed pawnbrokers, herbalists, bars. Dreams of commerce, their locations generally corresponding with the decks that had once carried vehicular traffic, while above them, rising to the very peaks of the cable towers, lifted the intricately suspended barrio, with its unnumbered population. He'd first seen it by night, 3 weeks before. Telepresence had only hinted at the magic and singularity of the thing, and he'd walked slowly forward into that neon maw in perfect awe. Fairyland. Rain-silvered plywood, broken marble from the walls of forgotten banks, painted canvas, mirrors, chrome gone dull, and peeling in the salt air. So many things, too much for his reeling eye, and he'd known that his journey had not been in vain. He entered it now, Tuesday morning, and found his way to a coffee shop whose interior had the texture of an ancient fairy, dark dented varnish over heavy wood, as if someone had sawn it entire from some tired public vessel. The young woman behind the counter wore tattooed bracelets in the form of indigo lizards. He asked for coffee. It arrived in thick, heavy porcelain. No two cups here were alike. He took his notebook from his bag, flicked it on, and jotted down a brief description of the cup. Sipping his coffee, he scrolled back to the previous day's notes. Yamazaki had spent one entire morning attempting to diagram the sewage collection arrangements for the group of dwellings on the bridge that he thought of as comprising Skinner's neighborhood. The waste-carrying hoses swooped down through the superstructure to meet below the lower deck in a 1,000-gallon holding tank. When this was full to capacity, Skinner had explained, a mercury switch in a float ball triggered a jet pump, forcing the accumulated sewage into a 3-foot pipe that carried it into the municipal system. He'd made a note to consider this junction as an interface between the bridge's program and the program of the city, but extracting Skinner's story of the bridge was obviously more important. Convinced that Skinner somehow held the key to the bridge's existential meaning, Yamazaki had abandoned his physical survey of the secondary construction in order to spend as much time as possible in the old man's company. Yamazaki had been Kawasaki for the first several visits. Now he was Scooter. Each night, in his borrowed apartment, Yamazaki would send the day's accumulation of material to Osaka University's Department of Sociology. The man Skinner's mind was remarkably like the bridge. Things had accumulated there, around some armature of original purpose, until a point of crisis had been attained and a new program had emerged. But what was that program? Skinner, gray, unshaven, the whites of his blue eyes yellowed, blotched with broken veins, had merely shrugged. The location of his room indicated a certain status, though Yamazaki wondered how many would have welcomed the chance to build atop one of the cable towers. Before the electric lift had been installed, the climb would have been daunting for anyone. Today, with his bad hip, the old man was in effect an invalid, relying on his neighbors and the girl. They brought him food, water, kept his chemical toilet in operation. The girl, Yamazaki assumed, received shelter in return, though the relationship struck him as deeper somehow, more complex. He looked down the counter, taking in the early morning profiles of the other customers, Americans. The fact that he was actually here, drinking coffee beside these people, still struck a chord of wonder. How extraordinary. He wrote in his notebook, the pen ticking against the screen. Hernandez followed Rydell into the kitchen of the house in Mar Vista. He wore a sleeveless powder blue jumpsuit and a pair of those German shower sandals, the kind with about 1,000 little nubs to massage the soles of your feet. Something I can do for you, Super? Other way around, Hernandez smiled. Somehow it wasn't reassuring. I've been thinking about you. The situation, not good, man. You never get to be a cop now. Right now I'm looking at something in retail sales. Hernandez narrowed his eyes and headed for the living room. Rydell thought he might be leaving, but he was only starting to pace. He turned just as he was about to enter the living room and paced back to Rydell. You got this hard-ass attitude sometimes, man. I don't know. You ought to stop and think maybe I'm trying to help you a little, right? Back toward the living room again. Just tell me what you want, okay? Hernandez stopped, turned, sighed. Never been up to NoCal, right? San Francisco? Anybody know you up there? No. Intent secures license in NoCal, too, right? Different state, different laws, whole different attitude. They might as well be a different fucking country. But it's the same company. They won't hire me here, they won't hire me there. Fucking A, nobody talked about hiring you. What this is, there's maybe something there for you with a guy. Works freelance. Company has certain kinds of problems. Sometimes they bring in somebody. But the guy, he's not intent secure. Freelance. Wait a second, what are we talking about here? Talking about freelance armed response? Guy's a skip tracer, you know what that is? Finds people when they try to get out from under debt, blow off the rent like that. Or take off with your kid in a custody case, whatever. So what a skip tracer mostly does, Rydell suggested, remembering one particular episode of Cops in Trouble he'd seen with his father, is keep you from having to go to the cops. Hernandez was watching him. Rydell walked past him into the living room, hearing the shower sandals come squishing after him across the dull tile floor. Listen, Rydell, you don't want to take this fine. My day off, I drive over here. You appreciate that. You get tweaked by some hackers. You fall for it. You push the response too hard. I can understand. Hernandez, my day off. Man, I don't know anything about finding people. You can drive all they want. Just drive. You drive the tracer, see? He's got his leg hassled. He can't drive. And this is like delicate, this thing. Requires some smarts. I told him I thought you could do it, man. I did that. I told him. Rydell saw himself on the futon from Futon Mouth, staring up those big stick-on flowers and bumper stickers. Is it legal? Legal? Do you think I would ask you to do something fucking illegal? What's the deal, Hernandez? I just go up there and drive? Fucking A, drive. Mr. Warbaby said drive, you drive. Who? Warbaby. This Lucius Warbaby. Barry, he's right on top of this shit. He's a fucking star, man. You do this, you learn shit. You're still young, man. You can learn shit. Who are they trying to find? Hotel theft. Somebody took something in Singapore, man. And some kind of serious twist about it, all I know. When do they want me to go? I give you this number. Hernandez handed Rydell a torn scrap of yellow paper. Call them. Thanks. Hey, Hernandez said. I like to see you do okay. I do. I like that. Colored light slanted into Skinner's room through the tinted pie wedge panes of the round window. Tuesday morning. Two of the smaller sections of glass had fallen out. The gaps were stuffed with pieces of rag, throwing shadows on the tattered yellow wall of National Geographics. Skinner was sitting up in bed, wearing an old plaid shirt, blankets, and sleeping bag pulled high up his chest. Chevette snaked her arm out into the November chill and snagged a sweater off the seat of a paint-caked wooden stool. She pulled the sweater into her bag and twisted into it, tugging it down over her knees. She rubbed her eyes, went to the ladder, bolted to the wall, and climbed the 5 rungs, undoing the catch on the roof hatch without bothering to look at it. She climbed out of the square hole and sat on its edge, dangling her bare legs down into the room. Sun struggling to burn off the silvery gray. On hot days, it heated the tar on the roof's flat rectangle, and you could smell it. A gray gull slid by, level with her eyes. The city looked the same as ever, the hills like sleeping animals behind the office towers she knew by their numbers. She ought to be able to see that hotel. The night before, it grabbed her by the back of the neck. She couldn't believe she'd done that, been that stupid. The case she'd pulled out of that dickhead's pocket was hanging up in Skinner's jacket, an iron hook shaped like an elephant's head. Nothing in it but a pair of sunglasses. Expensive looking, but so dark she hadn't even been able to see through them last night.